All right, I need your attention. Listen up. Quiet. Middle school. Shh. Let's go. All right, we're going to get started, so you need to listen up. All right. Here we go. We're going to get started. First of all, I need everybody's attention, and I need you to understand we have some very important guests with us today that have come a great distance to speak with you. So, and I've told them, that you guys are very capable of handling this, so please do not disappoint. So, before we begin, I just want to let you all know, we need to give your undivided attention to the speaker. Whatever is happening in the world right now can wait for the next so many minutes while the speaker talks with you. At the end, we have some community partners, as we normally have, around. High school, thank you very much for paying attention. Middle school, we need more eyes this way, mouths closed. Thank you. All right. So you'll get a chance to go around and visit those here shortly. So just pay attention, and we'll explain that after the guest speaker. But we're going to go ahead and get him going here. So I'm going to read a little brief introduction. It'll be followed by a video, and then he will come forward and start talking with you. Again, give him your undivided attention because he has something very valuable to share. Our speaker today is Mr. William Kellibrew IV. He is a worldwide advocate for children, youth, victims' rights. He has inspired many who have heard his powerful story of bouncing back from adversity. William experienced childhood trauma, battled substance use, depression, suicidal ideation, and many other barriers. It took him many years to change his behavior and move towards success in life. This is what's so important about this. His story has been featured, along with him, on the Oprah Winfrey Show, CNN, MSNBC, the Washington Post, and newspapers and televisions around the world. William thanks his grandmother of many responsible adults and youth who mentored and supported him through the toughest challenges throughout his survival. This is important, so please pay attention to this also. William's presentation today can be somewhat tough to hear. So, we need to look out for each other and yourself. If you have some needs, seek out a staff member that's sitting near you or around. Before William speaks, though, we would like to bring your attention to a special video presentation. So please give your undivided attention to the screen.
Grew up in a poor, crime-ridden neighborhood outside of Washington, D.C., and recently took our cameras back to the place where he says his childhood literally came to an end.
We're going to a home where really was a focal point of my growing up with my mother, the last days of her being alive. It's been a while since I've even driven past, and I don't think I've ever gotten out of the car. Oh, God. Just remember coming out of this house and just running up the street.
The last time William stood on this street, he was just 10 years old. It was July 2nd, 1984, when he woke up to the terrifying sound of his mother screaming.
It was right there, right in front of the house, right in front of the driveway. Her boyfriend was dragging her. That's when he came in, and he just started immediately loading his gun, and then he went over to my mother, and then he put the gun up to her face, and he just shot her about 2 times in her face, and she dropped right on the floor immediately. And I just remember all of this blood coming out of her mouth and just going all over the floor. And then he went to my brother, and then he shot my brother. Then he came to me, and he put the gun to my head. He squatted down. He did the squat like this, and he put the gun to my head. I immediately said to him, "Please don't kill me. Please don't kill me. I'll do anything. I'll do anything." And I asked him, and he didn't say one word to me. And that's when I looked up into the sky. I was like, "God, please, please don't let him kill me. Please don't let him kill me." And for some reason, he just pulled back. And then he said to me, "You can leave." Just ran right down here on the right, and just was banging on the door. When they asked me, "Well, what's going on? What's wrong? What's wrong?" And I could only say, my mother. And they kind of just, settled me down, They settled me down. I didn't know what was going on, Just pretty lost. No.
God, William, thank you for taking us back there. But what happened to you? Obviously, you're here. William's here.
Wow, I lost everything. I mean, I lost my mom. I was a mama's boy, so I went everywhere with her. And, that day I actually wanted to go with her, but, when it came to me pleading for my life, I decided that I wanted to go the other way, just at 10. But I was lost growing up as a teenager, and I didn't know where I was. I was just in a life of despair. I just had all my feelings just bundled up. Didn't get a chance to actually talk about it.
So who helped you?
My grandmother. I mean, she jumped right in that day. And she's been going ever since. She worked, I think, a week after.
Well, thank God for the grandmothers. Thank God for the grandmothers.
Antietam, please welcome Mr. William Kellibrew.
I always talk about values first. Our values and our beliefs drive our decision-making, our actions, and our behavior. What we say, what we do, is directly linked to what we value and believe. But I want to ask you a question. What do you value the most? What is the most important thing to you on earth? Anybody? Who? Your mom. Your mom. Cool. Anybody else? Your dad. Who else? Your brother and your family. What else? Your pets. Cool. Anybody else? What do you value the most? What's most important to you? Your wife. Anybody else want to share? Your teachers, right? What else? Or who else? Anybody else? Life. Somebody said life. Well, I want you to think about this. Imagine this. What if what you valued the most, what was most important to you, what mattered the most in life, was either lost, stolen, withheld from you, or even destroyed? That is exactly what happened to me sitting in that living room watching my mother get shot in her face. And watching my 12-year-old brother, who's 12 years old, watching my 12-year-old brother in that room also get shot. But as I said on that video with Oprah, he didn't stop there. he came and he put the gun to my head as a 10-year-old. And he made me beg for my life. While that was happening in that room, I was so in shock, I couldn't even think about what I was going to do next. I thought I was still going to die. But when he said from across the room, "Go ahead, you can leave," I took a moment because I really didn't believe him. I didn't think that if I got up and moved that maybe he was lying to me. Maybe he wasn't going to let me go. But I raised up off of the steps in that living room. And can you imagine the sounds in that room, anybody? What that sounded like? It wasn't silent, let's just say that. And I got up slowly, and I walked toward the door, and I grabbed the doorknob, and I opened the doorknob. I opened the door, and for a second, I just put one foot through like that, and I asked, did he want me to lock the door? And when he didn't respond to me, I just put my other foot through the door, closed the door, and walked slowly away from our house. You got the house up there? That's my mom and my brother who was killed is the top right, on the top right. Can you bring up the next shot? This was our home. It's all in the newspapers, all in the community. They blocked off miles. They blocked off so that they thought that they had the guy who was going to escape, so they had to block off the entire area. And so that's our house. And I walked off of that porch from that door, and I sat right there on those steps where that door's open. And I walked slowly here. And you see that window? I kept thinking he was going to shoot me through the window, so I just walked slowly. And I walked slowly, and I got down their steps and went through our driveway. And when I thought I was safe, I ran for my life. It took 3 hours for police to go into our house to be able to recover. And after they went in, they found 3 bodies. That was more than likely my mom in that photo right there. My brother was in there. He was still trying to survive, I guess, because he had lost a lot of blood. But the first shot that hit him, he didn't die. My mom died instantly, but he was still trying to actually survive in that room. But when they took him out, they took him to the hospital, and he died, and they pronounced him dead at the hospital. And then, of course, the man who killed him, he had actually taken his own life that day. 3 hours. So the police took me to the police station, and that's where I was rejoined with my other family members, my grandmother, my sister, my other brothers. And we tried to figure out what to do next. The next day, my grandfather takes me to his house to, get through this, to do, planning around the funeral. And when he took me to his house, he was pulling up at his house, and he got into an argument with a neighbor who had parked in his parking space. It was a free parking space, but he said, I was trying to park there first. And the guy said, well, I'm not going to move my car. So my grandfather got out, basically hit the guy, and they started a fight. My grandfather goes in the house, grabs a gun, comes back out, and he shoots the next door neighbor right in front of me. See that newspaper article? That's the newspaper article from the next day that captured my grandfather's situation. So he got arrested that day. And then my grandmother picked me up. My grandmother picked me up. She came over the house, picked me up, because she thought she was actually delivering me to somebody safe. She thought that by letting me go with my grandfather, they weren't together, but let him go with my grandfather, which was my mom's dad, that he would be able to work with me and support me, because I love my grandfather, right? We fished, we had a lot of fun. But she picked me back up from there, and we were going somewhere to one of my uncle's homes just to kind of get ourselves together. And we stopped off at a thrift store. Anybody know what a thrift store is? Like, all right, so we stopped at this thrift store, and she went in, and she didn't say much, but she let me walk down this toy aisle to pick out any toy I wanted. I'm going to tell you, that day, on July 2nd, 4th, when I watched those murders, I was sitting in that house playing with Matchbox cars and Hot Wheels cars, and when he pulled out the gun, that's when I started paying attention to what was happening in the room. But when I left with my shorts on, my little T-shirt, and no shoes, and I walked away from our house, and I never went back in again. So collecting any toys, any clothes, any papers, any photos, no, nothing. Nothing. You just got to get up, and you just got to go. Who knows what I'm talking about when you got to drop everything? Who knows what I'm talking about? When everything in your possessions you can't even touch anymore. So my grandmother picked me up, took me to the thrift store, and in that thrift store, she let me walk down the toy aisle, and instead of trying to pick toys out for me, she basically let me pick it out, and I picked 3 toys out. You want to know what they were? Number 1, you all know that orange car, you're probably too young for this, but that Dukes of Hazzard car? The General Lee? Okay, I picked out the General Lee, and trust me, I made sure the doors couldn't open, because if they open, it's a fake. All right, that's number 1, the General Lee Dukes of Hazzard car, right? Number 2, I got this toy plane now that you could put the little Bobbleman action figures in, but remember back then in 1984, you know, we didn't have remote controls, so all you have right now, you can fly planes, remote controls. Back then, you had to have that plane in your hand, and your hand was the remote control, right? Going like that. And number 3 toy, who knows what I'm talking about when I say those green army men that are like stiff, they just have one position like this, and you gotta figure out, you gotta imagine what the next position is, all right? So I bought that, and that night, on the living room floor of my uncle's house, I played with those toys just to get myself to sleep. Do you think it was hard to get to sleep that night? Think it was difficult? Very difficult. But can you go on to the next one? So before I returned to school, which I'll talk about, actually go back to the last slide, Jerron. Before I go on there, my grandmother jumped in, right? My grandmother worked like 38 years on her job, and I'll go back to the school, but she worked 38 years on her job trying to raise kids, right? There were 5 of us. One of our kids, my mom's kids was killed. She was killed. So there were 4 of us she had to take care of. But she jumped right in, right? She worked 38 years on her job, and you know how many times she was late? Less than 10 times. And she never used an alarm clock. Now, why do you think she got up? She never used an alarm clock, right? Her bedtime usually is 6 o'clock. So you're not going to be late in the morning and get up at 6 a.m. if you go to bed by 6 p.m., right? That's probably why she didn't need an alarm clock. But the best thing about my grandmother was that was her only daughter. You take care of somebody and you raise somebody. 30 years of raising somebody that you put your values in, your support in, and your lessons in, and they get killed at 30. That's not, I can't even say what that is. I just say it's extremely tough to lose a child. But I didn't know what that means because I never lost a child before, right? But my grandmother, I was watching, she had lost a child. But later in her job, less than 10 times, 38 years on her job, that lady knew what her mission was every day she got up. She knew she had mouths to feed, and she had to do something about it. And so anytime that I get an opportunity to thank my grandmother, I always do. And I brought her today. My shiro, the hero. Why don't you stand up and just wave to the crowd and let them know. When we went on Oprah, they asked me to come by myself. I was going to school in England, and they said, okay, we're doing this show, and we got to figure out whether we want to bring you on. So tell me about your story. What's going on? And Oprah said, okay, let's bring them on to the show, right? And so I called my grandmother, and I told my grandmother that I was going on Oprah, and the producers on the show said to me, I said to them, there's no way I'm going to go on Oprah without my grandmother. You can't bring her on, I can't come. And they said, oh, okay, cool. Let's bring your grandmother. We'll fly her out too. And my grandmother says, well, I can't go without your sister. I'm like, y'all gonna get me kicked off of the show already, all right? So not only that, she brings my sister and they bring another friend. All four of us went on. After that show, right, my grandmother never said a word. The only time Oprah actually got up out of her seat on that show was what? To hug my grandmother. She said, thank God for grandmothers. Because you know what? Oprah had a grandmother once too, by the way. She knows the value of what grandmas are and moms are and dads are. She knows that value, right? But there was something happening, and there was a celebrity in the back room, and I'm telling you this because I think it's an interesting story, but she was in the back with this other celebrity, not Oprah. She was in the back, and Oprah came in near the room, and she came up to me, and I was trying to get her to sign a book. And she was like, no, I can't sign that book because it's not mine. She said, but I can take a photo. She grabbed my hand, and she took me out to grab a photo. And as we're standing there taking a photo with my sister, without my grandmother, she's in the back with some celebrity. I don't know what's going on back there, but she's in the back with a celebrity talking and you know, having a good time. And Oprah starts yelling for my grandmother to come out of the room. She's like, Grandma, Grandma, Grandma. And so we're waiting for her to take the picture. My grandmother comes out the hallway, and she's standing there. And she just leans over and looks out, and she's like, I can't believe this. And what do you think Oprah said to her? Oh, yeah, you can. Oh, yeah, you can. And she told my grandmother, the best is yet to come. And we've been holding on to the best is yet to come every single day that we wake up in the morning. Because we're going to have challenges. We're going to have things that stop us. We might face murders. We might see those things. We might see our lives could be ravaged. We may not even be able to concentrate in class every single day and got to move from what everybody else thinks is a mainstream school to an alternative school to be able to concentrate, to be able to connect with teachers who may understand exactly what we might be going through, to support us on our journey. So that's my grandmother. And next. So I had to go to the 5th grade, go to school. Now, who's ever gone to school and couldn't concentrate? Okay, that's a little bit of all of us. All right, I'm just being honest here, okay? So I'll tell you what happened. I went to the 5th grade. Experts, doctors, experts who do all this work around psychology and psychiatry, doctors say that for kids under 10, the most common coping strategy, or who knows, I've heard of coping strategies, right? Coping. All right, the most common coping strategy or coping device is what? When you can't concentrate in class, what is the number one thing that you do to cope? Anybody? What would you do, huh? Sleep? Leave. Leave could be coping because it could be, the environment could be just upsetting, right? And so to cope with it, you just kind of need to take yourself out of it, right? Is that accurate? Cool. Leave. Anybody else? Music. So I'm talking about the most common coping strategy for kids under 10 years old in a classroom, right? Or anywhere. Anybody else? So we got music. That's a good guess. Put your head down. Anybody else? What's that? Play with the ball. Play with the ball. Play with it. Yeah, go ahead. Get on your phone. Back in 1984, you didn't have no phone. So you know what I'm saying? So you got an extra coping strategy we wish we had back in 1984. Huh? Daydream. Anybody else? All right, go. Class clown, class clown. That's why I like to make people laugh, because I became the ultimate class clown. Now I get paid for it. I get paid, so I channel my energy. Go ahead. Huh? Draw or doodle on paper. Well, experts say that the most common coping strategy for kids under 10 is to dissociate. Anybody know what dissociation is? What'd you say? Leave the, that's a great, what'd you say? Relieve the area of other people. So that means that if I'm getting this right, what you said, I'm connected to sort of going off the la-la land, just, out of your mind. You're no longer in the room. You're kind of daydreaming or thinking about things that are well beyond the room. So it could be a feeling like you're in la-la land or, an out-of-body experience, because you're like, you know what? I know I'm in class today, but I just need to stare out the window for like 5 hours. Can you just give me a break? That's the most common coping strategy. So in 5th grade, that's what I did. And what do you think happens to kids who may not be paying attention to a lesson while it's being taught, and they have created 15 worlds, and they're being called several times to pay attention? What do you think happens to that kid sometimes? They could fail. Anybody else? They can get yelled at. Excuse me, Mr. Kellibrew. Excuse me, Mr. Kellibrew. Are you listening to me? No, because I'm staring out the window. Anybody else? Anybody else? What happens if you don't pay attention in class? What'd you say? You don't figure it out. Anybody else? Huh? Somebody calls home. Get parents involved or someone else involved. You could miss something important, right? Anybody else? One more. I'm looking for another specific answer, please. You may not learn, right? Anybody else? Don't get your work done. Is there something else that you get that happens? Sent to the office. You can get labeled, right? You know, what were you gonna act out? So when teachers perceive you as acting out, what can happen to you in that case? You get in trouble. Well, guess what? I love these answers you all are giving. So you could get in trouble, right? Does anybody agree that you could get a consequence? That you could get consequence? I want to give you one lesson, one tool, right? This thing you could use to be able to engage anybody. And at your age, it's good to learn this, right? So all behavior has meaning. Who believes that? All behavior has meaning. When we judge behavior, we might miss the meaning behind behavior. Is that right? So all behavior has meaning. When we judge behavior, we may often miss meaning. What does meaning provide for us? If we can understand why people are behaving a certain way, what does it do for us? Will we understand the reason behind behavior? Or would there be an explanation for somebody acting a certain way? And my brother right here in the back, he said acting out. And so many people act out in the classroom, but when the teacher may judge you and say you're acting out, go to the principal's office. I'm not saying the principal's office is not the best thing to do, but I'm talking about when you judge somebody and you consequence them based on their behavior without understanding exactly why they're behaving that way, you could be doing what? You could be consequencing a survival strategy. Because guess what? In the 5th grade, if my teacher understood the images that was actually happening in my head, now, listen up. You have images in your head about my experience in 1984, but guess what? If you walked every day to school and got into a 5th grade class and you were thinking about these things that were tough for you, let me just ask you a question here. Is there anybody in this room who's ever come to a classroom every day and you couldn't get something out of your head? That was causing a challenge for you to even study or even learn, right? That's what was happening to me. And you know what my teacher did? Now, I love my teachers back then, right? But 1984, we needed a little bit more training on this, right? Because there were kids coming to class who with real problems, and the teacher said, Mr. Kellibrew, I'm going to consequence you. You're not paying attention in class, so I'm going to have you write on the chalkboard, I will pay attention in class. I will pay attention in class. Who know what I'm talking about? You ever write a little handwriting exercise with the teacher? The teacher says, I will pay attention in class. And when the lesson was on the board and I couldn't write on the board, you had to write on sheets of paper. I will pay attention in class. But if my teacher understood what I was coming to school with in the 5th grade every single day, that I was seeing my mom and my brother every single day and I could not get it out, I just needed to stare off for like 5 more minutes. Give me a second to figure out something else to try to soothe myself so that I won't be thinking about those things. And so as teachers, as other students, we should understand that when we see somebody behaving a certain way, that we should step back for a second and say, why are they acting that way? Because you could be consequencing what we call a survival strategy. Now, me staring out of the classroom window was William Kellibrew at age 10 trying to survive 5th grade. Who's trying to survive 7th grade? Who's trying to survive the 9th grade? Who's just trying to survive getting to school every day? Right? Do you know somebody, not yourself, but do you know somebody trying to survive every day? It's tough. It could be tough. So anyway, that was what happened to me in the 5th grade. And so move on for me. Next. So I went to the 6th grade, okay? Now in the 6th grade, my teacher, I'm going to ask you a question. How does your parents or family or anyone that's your guardian, how do they get your report card or your progress report? Huh? They what? They mail it? Okay, let's mail it. Anybody say something over here? Internet? Well, in the 6th grade, my teacher gave me my report card in my hand, and they sealed it. And they said, make sure it gets to your parents. Now, I didn't know what the secret was inside because it was sealed, but I got it on home, right? And I gave it to my grandmother. And I let her get that report card in her hand, and she opened it up, and she saw some grades in there, kind of a little bit all over the place. But in the bottom, it said, William is too loquacious. Now, of course, my grandmother's like, whatever it is, you don't know what it means, but whatever it is, you need to get it together. All right? Me, I'm like a 6th grade spelling bee champ. I was in 3rd place. I wasn't in 1st place, but I was still a champ in the spelling bee, right? So that meant I went to the dictionary and looked up loquacious, and what do you think it said? Beside loquacious, said what? Talkative. William has a mouth, and he gets moved from seat to seat because he's talking to everybody. He's always talking during every event. He's always talking in the classroom. He was actually trying to date this girl named Nanice Neal. I was trying to date this girl, Nanice Neal, and I was always talking to her and stuff like that. And I got moved from Nanice Neal on the other side of the classroom because I was talking and talking and talking and talking. I couldn't stop laughing and class clowning. Talking and talking and talking. Well, guess what? If my teacher understood at that time that I couldn't concentrate on a lot of work sometimes, so sometimes that class clown for me and that laughing all the time and that stuff was just me being real nervous in classroom. Just me being real nervous because as long as I could talk to people, I was feeling comfortable. Well, guess what? Today, and this is not bragging on anything, but I make a living talking. Because guess what I'm doing right now? Talking. So I ended up making a career out of communicating and talking internationally throughout the world. When I speak, most people would listen. Oprah listened. I work with a lot of celebrities, so Dickie Simmons listened. Across the world. I've even called out Obama a few times if I've visited him, and I said, Mr. President, he stops and he turns around. There's a way you got to ask people to do things. So I'm just saying that was my strength. Talking, trying to communicate was my strength. So when we consequence people for their behaviors and say, you are doing something wrong, you should say, it's not what's wrong with me. It's about what happened to me. Anybody get what I'm saying? That when you say what's wrong with somebody, you're immediately probably saying to them, you aren't perfect, you never got it right, you aren't right. So when you ask me if I'm wrong, I will say to you, it's not about what's wrong with me at all, because I'm perfectly where I am. It's about what happened to me. So when somebody says to you, what's wrong? And they say it in the most compassionate way and trying to figure out, what's wrong with you? Or what's wrong with him? Nothing's wrong with him or wrong with her. It's about what happened to her. If we explored if we were a detective, we could figure out what happened rather than put the blame on somebody because they're trying to survive, okay? All right, next. Anything else? All right, so listen, in the 7th grade, I just woke up one day and I said, you know what? I'm done. I'm completely done. I don't even want to live anymore. I don't want to breathe on this earth because it's just too hard to do that. And so I put my book bag on, grabbed $5 that my grandmother usually gave me for school, I can't concentrate right now. And one of the reasons why I can't concentrate because there's a certain level of respect. I'm talking about my mother being killed. And that might be uncomfortable for somebody in this room. Sometimes it's uncomfortable for me because I don't have her here on earth anymore. So when I talk about it, I'm very serious when I talk about my mom. I'm not asking anybody to respect me at all in this room. But I just think that I need to stop for a second and just let you know this is an important conversation for me. All right? So what I'm saying is, you may grow up in life and you may be an adult, you may go on in life, and you still will be challenged with situations. You still will be challenged with situations, even as I'm challenged today, even talking about this. So let me just ask you, if you want to leave, right? If you actually want to leave because it's a tough situation, you should never be forced to sit here and listen to this. That's number one. You agree? Anybody agree with me? That if this is tough for you and you don't want to sit here, is there a place where anybody can go right now that we have a holdover space for anybody who might not want to be here to talk about this? Because it might be difficult. So, but no blame. I'm not blaming any one particular person. I'm just saying if you don't feel comfortable and safe, that's the whole point of talking about this. Make sure this is a safe environment for you. You know? You agree with, do you know, anybody know what I'm talking about? Can you explain what I'm talking about? I just want to have a conversation.
It's like if you don't want to be in here, you don't want to learn about sad stuff.
And it's sad stuff, but look, there's a good part of this, right? Do you think there's a good part of the conversation already? What do you think is positive about the conversation?
That you grew up and went stronger.
Oh, thank you very much. No, that's perfect. I grew up and I turned something that was tragic in 1984. It took me 20 years to be able to get up like this and talk about it. So over the past 10 to 15 years, I've been talking about it. But it took 20 years to get there. So what's your name? Adam, I appreciate that answer because you just described my entire life just in those few words, and I appreciate that. Let's give Adam a round of applause, actually. So at any rate, I woke up one day and I said, you know what? I'm done with this. And so I was walking to school, and that morning I said, you know what? I'm just going to throw myself off of the bridge in the neighborhood, and that's it. Exactly, right? What was I thinking? And I'm going on this bridge, and I stood on this bridge, and I'm looking at this bridge, and I was going to go off of the bridge, and I said, one split second before I jumped, I asked myself two things. I debated. I said, am I ever going to see my mom and brother again and be connected? Or would I go to heaven or hell? Because I didn't know whether heaven and hell was real. I didn't know what thing. I was so confused about anything. I was so confused, I said, you know what? I'm just going to come back at 3. I'll just come back later on. And I left the bridge and went to school. And when I went to school, I couldn't concentrate again. And so I ended up in my assistant principal's office, Mr. Christian. Mr. Christian was the disciplinarian of all the boys in the school. And so when I went to Mr. Christian's office, Mr. Christian noticed that I was completely distraught. He noticed I was this is like a William I've never seen before. And he looked in my eyes. And so when Mr. Christian said, you know what, I'm going to call your grandmother. So he called my grandmother at work. My grandmother called Children's Hospital, and they had me do this assessment at the hospital. And that day, I actually got admitted into the psychiatric hospital for 30 days. When I got out, they sent me to outpatient therapy. and I met this lady named Christine Pierre. And Christine Pierre was a social worker. She was a therapist, and she did something very interesting. Instead of having the therapy session in her office, she took me to the cafeteria, right? And she stood there at the cafeteria, and she's looking at all the food, and I'm standing there as a 13-year-old looking up to her, and she basically puts her hands out and says, "What do you want for lunch?" And I'm like, wait a minute. Now, it's 14 of us living in this new place, right? My grandmother, my sisters and brothers, we moved in with my grandmother's sister. It was 14 people living in, right? It's a total change from 6 people living in the house to 14 people living in this new house. And so when you have dinner or lunch or something like that, imagine 14 people trying to eat the same meal. Nah, you got to cook some stuff over, right, Adam? You're going to have to do a whole nother set of fries later on. So somebody's going to be waiting. But here I am, one-to-one, sitting with Christine Pierre, and she says, "What do you want for lunch?" I looked up at Christine Pierre, and I basically said, I'm going to clean you out. You're not going to have no paycheck or no food left over up in this cafeteria. And I walked into that cafeteria, and I went to do the ice cream cone, and I must have built the biggest ice cream cone you could build on this side of earth. You all know what I'm talking about, the kind that is still dripping down, and you licking it before you even pull it away. That was the kind of ice cream that I was eating that day. And I had pizza, ice cream. What do you think Christine Pierre was doing when she was sitting beside me in that cafeteria? What was she doing? Huh? She was watching me, right, to learn about me, right? Did you think she was building a relationship? You think she was building a trusting relationship, trying to create a relationship? She was trying to create trust. Somebody once said that trust is the first casualty of early abuse. What do I mean by that? Anybody want to describe that to me? When I say trust is the first casualty of early abuse, one of our one of our teenagers. Anybody want to describe it for me? When I say trust is the first casualty of early abuse, you want to take it? What's your name?
My name's
Sean. Sean. Good to meet you, Sean.
Yeah, well, it's because trust can be abused and taken for granted most of the times. So,
yeah. It goes out the window first. What's your name again? Sean. Sean. Let's give Sean a round of applause. Sean, sometimes it takes a lot of courage to actually say something in front of an entire group, right? You cool? Oh, you're not even nervous. You're better than me then. Go ahead. That's cool, because I'm nervous. But I'm channeling my energy. So good job, Sean. So now that makes me feel good, so I can stand here as well. So that's it. Trust goes first, and people take it for granted. So when somebody harms you, it's out the window first. And it's just hard to regain trust with people. So that could be a very difficult thing to not trust because somebody actually hurt you. All right? So she was building trust, and she was building this connection with this kid in this room. So I never saw Christine Pierre again. I never saw Charles Christian again, the assistant principal. I just went on with my life. I've been hospitalized at least 9 times. I went into residential treatment. I was in I had an IEP as well, which was I was in special education classes, right, back in my teenagers. Because what? It wasn't because, hey, I'm not the smartest kid on earth, because, hey, I am a third place spelling bee champ, all right? So don't judge me, all right? Don't judge me. I won't judge you, all right? So what I'm saying is that we had that situation going on. So for me, I went on with my life. And I started doing this work and started actually helping other people. I started supporting other people like I'm doing right now. And I'm trying to bring these conversations up to talk about what it takes sometimes to bounce back from adversity. And all of a sudden, I got this email message from somebody who said, are you talking about, by the way, I sent out a message saying, if you were feeling suicidal, you could call this number. If you were feeling suicidal, you could reach out to these people. You reach out to somebody that you could trust, right, Sean? Somebody you can trust that would be able to connect you to some services or be able to support you to get through it, right? So I got an email back from this guy saying, are you talking about Mr. Christian? Is somebody like Mr. Christian? And Mr. Christian, who worked at Langley Junior High School, and I was like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. He said, well, I said, you know him? And the guy said, yeah, it's my great uncle. And I'm thinking it's been 27 years, And I hadn't seen Mr. Christian basically since junior high school, since he helped me out. And he talked to my grandmother and got me some help before I jumped off of a bridge. I'm like, whoa. And I was like, well, how old is he? The guy was like, well, he's 86 years old. And I was like, well, give me his number right away. Because I was like, okay, this guy's at 86. Not that 86 years old is the cliffhanger. You know, not that you'll die at 86. But I wanted to make sure that I got in touch with Mr. Christian before anything happened to him, so I could just call him. And so I called this number that he gave me, and this is how the conversation went. Ring, ring. Right on the first ring, somebody answered the phone, and they said, hello? And I said, may I speak to Mr. Christian? I said, this is William Kellibrew. May I speak to Mr. Christian? And the person on the other end of the line said, this is Mr. Christian. And I was like, wow, Mr. Christian, this is William Kellibrew. You remember me? And the guy on the other end of the line, in his raspy voice I remember since junior high school, he said, hey, Billy boy. I'm like, you know what? That's definitely Mr. Christian, because I have never allowed anybody, and I would kick somebody's butt for calling me Billy Boy, first of all. So I knew he was the only person who ever called me Billy Boy in my entire life. Billy Boy, like that's trashy name, right? Billy Boy. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me, right? Nobody ever called me that but him. So I knew that was code word for that's definitely Mr. Christian. And I said, Mr. Christian, I just want to tell you, thank you very much. You saved my life. And he said, well, Billy boy, he won't get up off it, right? He's like, Billy boy, he said, I've been listening to you on the radio, watching you on television, and just reading about you. He said, and I know you made it past the 9th grade. I'm like, yeah, and got a job, went to school. Okay, I got this, I did this. And so I left away from that conversation feeling like, you know what? Wow. Thanking Mr. Christian 27 years later for saving my life and giving me an opportunity to even stand here today, you deserve a thank you. So I said, wow, where is that lady, Christine Pierre? Because she had a British accent, right? She was from Grenada, she was from the Caribbean islands, and she had this British accent. And she didn't know that she inspired me a lot just with her accent. So I used to leave her sessions every day, and I used to practice her accent so that, you know, I would grow up and actually have a British accent. You know, it was kind of crazy how it all worked out, you know? So it actually helped me out with a lot of acting and everything. So I became British outside of the sessions, and she had no idea, right? So at any rate, I said, I got to find this lady. So I said, you know what? Maybe I put her name on a Scooby-Doo van, get a little bullhorn, and walk across America and try to just yell her name in communities. I said, I'm going to do the internet version of that. I put her name in Google, okay? So I put it in Google, and 501 million Christine Pierre show up. I'm like, whoa, how am I going to find this lady, right? So I started narrowing down the search and started looking at my area, D.C., Maryland. I was like, okay, I got to find her. And I sent these messages out, but it just became too much. It was like too overwhelming for me, so I just stopped looking for her. And so 3 weeks later, my office got a call, and they left a name and a number. And my office called me and said, it's Christine Pierre, returning a call. And I'm thinking, could this be the Christine Pierre that I had as my therapist who actually built that relationship so I can actually start feeling better about myself so I can be where I am today? And so I called this number, and this is how it went, ring, ring. And I said, ring, ring, and somebody on the other line answered the phone, and they said, hello? I said, may I speak to Christine Pierre? And the person on the other end of the line said, this is Christine Pierre. And I said, wow, Miss Pierre, this is William Kellibrew. You remember me? And she said, no. I was like, you got to be kidding me. All of that to get to, you're not the one. So she said, well, tell me about yourself. And I started telling her about myself and my story. She interjected, and she said, you know what? She said, you know what, William? I do remember you. She said to me, I don't remember your name. I vaguely remember your face 27 years ago. But I remember that I had to tell you something when you were my patient that I couldn't tell you as my patient because of the therapist-patient relationship. It was something she could not tell me when I was her patient. It probably would have been unethical or illegal to tell me this at age 13. And so I said, well, what is it? I'm all grown now. What is that one thing you remember for 27 years? And she said to me, when you were my patient, my mother died. So every day I was coming into those sessions. She couldn't tell me that her mom died, but what she could tell me was, I understand to a degree what you might be going through and how difficult it is, because Christine Pierre said that my mom was my rock. She was my everything, this person I valued the most, person I wanted to see me graduate from the college classes, and she never got a chance to see me graduate. You know, and I said, well, what was your job back then, Miss Pierre? Because I always call you super therapist. And she said, you know what, William? I was an intern social worker. I wasn't even the social worker. And I'm like, whoa, an intern saved my life? I'm like, anybody can do this. Everybody plays a role in supporting somebody else. And I'll just close out with this by saying to you that not only just intern social workers, but how many of you all have a brother or a sister or somebody of a classmate who has been supporting you every single day? You can come to school every day and say, you know what? I love coming to school because this teacher, because this student, this is my peer. I don't know what I would do without them. Who knows what I'm talking about when you have somebody who you can trust? That's okay. You want to make a comment? That's cool. It's up to you if you want to talk. You know, this is your mic too. This is your mic too. I'm sharing the mic, all right? You want to say it? Yeah, come. Please. If you feel comfortable. Okay. All right. Tell me later. So, what I want to do is just kind of open up a little bit, right? What time is it now? 2:20. What time have we finished here? 2:30. Listen, I want to give 10 minutes, right? You can ask me or my grandmother any question you want to ask us, okay? Out here. Is that cool? Do you all prefer that? All right. So, my brother right here has a question. I'm 43, and I'm 43 years old, and I try to look like I'm 25. So I'm really 25. Thank you very much. You got me on the spot on this one. I don't feel old, but sometimes let me tell you what 43 will do for you. 43 will let you know it's 43, all right, and not 21. What age did you think? 30s, yes. My new best friend. You should have said 20s, but that's cool.
I have a question for your grandmother. I would like to know what advice she could give us to help raise children to be successful and happy.
Well, I will, as I'm bringing this up, not everybody gets to a point where you could see him like this, right? My youngest brother was convicted of 18 felony counts, serving a 97-year prison sentence in Pennsylvania for behavior. But he and I have to say this because there's films going, he still proclaims his innocence and he feels like he was wronged. On the other end of that, he was convicted of felonies, but he's still fighting the case. And I'll say that publicly because my brother in prison sometimes watch videos. And one time he watched a video and I didn't tell a whole story, so he felt like in prison. And I visited him. He said, you just represent me the best way so that I don't feel bad about being in here for what was happening. So we had to work through that. So whenever I talk about him publicly, he said to me one time, I said, how you doing? He said, I felt like I've been buried alive in prison. But we have our family wrapped around him, we're supporting him, and he's still fighting his case, okay? So I just want to say that publicly for him. But for my grandmother, what advice would you give Miss Short, Billy Boy's grandmother, on what do you do, what are some of the things that you could do to help your grandkids and your kids be successful? What have you done? You want to stand up real quick and answer a question?
What? What do you mean?
So what did you do? to raise us, to make us successful?
Well, I did quite a lot, and I went through a lot. I did everything I could to make them feel comfortable in the loss of what had happened. So, like what I did, I worked to work and everything, and just did everything I could to make them happy at home and everything regardless. And I put them into mental institutions, and they did a terrific job in that. And today, I'm so proud of them, my grandchildren right now. So, you know, I'm just proud. I feel so happy today. So thank you all. I'm not a speaker.
Hold on. So one of the things that, you know, and if you don't mind, because this is so funny, because I heard a kid walk in, I don't know who he is, but one kid walked in and he said a curse word. I'm thinking, whoa, right? But, oh, that was you? Oh, okay, that's cool. You identified yourself, right? I'm not judging you. You were like, you know, I love the honest. Trust is about being transparent and being honest. And so I said that, I heard it. He said, that was me. I'm like, all right, brother. You got to give me a hand on that one. All right. Just that relationship of trust. We can get to different language later on, but this is the language that you have right now, right? So we walked in and he said the curse word. So I'm just going to say a little bit of a curse word myself, if you don't mind. And I said, we gave my grandmother hell. Can I say that? Yeah. We gave her hell as a teenager, running away from home, substance use. I mean, we did it, running away, stealing cars at age 15, whatever. Oh, yeah, I look good now. I look 25, like my friend said, but I've been through some things, all right? Gang violence, being involved. I used to be strapped with a gun on myself, walking in D.C. every single day when I was in my teenage years. So my grandmother had to actually raise us with all of that stuff going on, and she stopped me one day, and she said to me, and it was clear, and she looked me in the eyes and said, you might have lost your mother, but what? You don't know what it like to lose a child. Remember you said that? Huh? You may have lost your mom, but you don't know what it feels like to what?
To lose, well, I lost my husband 1 month before my daughter was murdered. He was murdered a month before, and you just don't know how it feels when you lose somebody close like that.
Yeah, she told me, and in fact, because we don't have all the time in the world, before her daughter and her grandchild were killed and we experienced that, less than 30 days before that, her husband was also killed and murdered. She took the money that she got out of that to bury her daughter and her granddaughter who didn't have any money to be able to do that, okay? So that's what happened. That's what happened with that situation. But she told me, you may have lost your mother, but you don't know what it feels like to lose a child. What she was saying was, trauma is an individual experience. No two people are ever going to go through anything the same. So we never compare traumas. We never say, oh, you know, I know what you're going through. What's the first answer with, I know what you're going through? No, you don't. Right?
I want to say something else, too, that I went through. I found that holding things in doesn't help. You need to let it out. Cry it out or talk it out. And that's what helped me over the years. Crying it and letting it out or talking about it. And that helped me over the years to get through what I had gone through.
Yeah, big time. Now, at first, when it first happened, the way that she let it out was she was hyper vigilant, hyper aroused. When you experience trauma, sometimes you get hyper vigilant, which means instead of going from 0 to 60 when you're upset, it's like going from 60 to 100. I'm already on 60 speed and about to get a ticket, okay? If you touch me, if you look at me, if you just stare at me long, I'm like, what you looking at? I used to be that way. I was like, why are you looking at me? I used to be, you know, you go to a restaurant, I used to always say, I'm not going to sit. I'm always going to sit to watch the door. So I never have to feel like my back is in trouble, and I was always watching my back. You know what, today, I did that for so many years, but you know what, today, it doesn't matter which side I sit on. That's what bringing it back down to 0 to 60 looks like. It looks like, you know what, if anything's going to happen to us, it may happen, right? but I'm not going to live my life every single day worried about trying to do this. And some of us have some real threats. I work in Baltimore City. Right now, we've hit an overall record, over 320 murders in the city. We have hit a record in the city of Baltimore. So yeah, I am concerned about where I walk, what I do, and look for my safety, and we can always be safe. But my grandmother, she was very hypervigilant after that, so her feelings were always up here. So if the kids were running away and stuff like that, so one of the things she did very early on was she yelled all the time, right? She yelled. Her voice was always loud and screaming. So I hated screaming. So I actually ran away from home just based on the fact that I didn't want to hear anybody yelling at me. But today, look how calm she is. It's amazing, right? Look how she's on 0 to 60. She could start at 0 if she gets upset. The therapy helped. It took a lot of work. Anybody else for a question? Okay, I'm going to go here. And could you give me your name, please?
My name is Autumn. I just wanted to ask, how did you feel when you got to see like the Obama and everything? And how did you feel? I just don't really know how people would feel.
Okay, the question was, how did I feel when I met Obama and that work? And somebody else had a question back here. I'm gonna take 2 of them and then work my way back.
I can talk loud.
Okay, go for it. Yeah, lots of folks. Okay, let me start with that question. So what age was it? I'll say that at different ages, there were different light bulbs, right? When I went to the hospital at age 13, I got first introduced to an environment where I was like, you know what? I may have a chance to actually live and be able to concentrate, and I feel like I'm addressing things, right? But then when I went back to school, maybe around in my early 20s, that was another epiphany for me. It was an opportunity for me to say, you know, I'm shifting the way that I'm doing things. But I think at 13, I had my first change, and then I got involved with a group that was doing very negative things on the streets. And one time I got arrested. And I didn't go to prison. I got out, and I was like, you know what? I can't do that again, because I just kind of thought of who I was, and I was like, prison's not going to do it. I'm not going to be, you know, I've heard the really bad stories in prison. I was like, you know, I don't want to do that. So I just kind of try to figure out something differently. And then I always have my grandmother there to support the positive pathway. How did I feel about meeting President Obama? I've come from D.C., Southeast D.C., I come from Southeast D.C., and my family is part of probably some of the roughest family members in the city back then. This is the 1990s, where the crack epidemic is much like the opioid epidemic today, where family members are dying, where sometimes you see what's happening around substance use or drug use, right? But I never thought, Autumn, I never thought, Autumn, in a million years that I would end up on these television shows, that I would be sitting in a room focusing on mental health and how does this country focus on mental health, with the president being in the room leading the discussion. So I got a job that always engaged the White House, and so I was always at the White House. I was always working with many of the people that you see on the television every single day, meeting those people, working closely with those people, and so it felt like, instead of causing my grandmother pain all these years and over 20 years of causing her mischief and pain, I felt like now I'm actually doing something about it. And I'm respected at that, 99% respected, right? You gotta leave some room for people who might not respect you, right? But I respect it. And you know what? The biggest thing for me in life right now is that my grandmother used to give me $5 every day when I was going to school in junior high school. From 7th grade on up, high school, she gave me money. $5 every day. You know what the best thing about being able to get through this is? All you need, folks, all you need is one person to believe you and believe in you. You figure out who that one person is that believes in you, and don't let anybody tell you you can't do it. You know what? Put your hand up because the ears are not listening. Tell them you believe in yourself and find that one person to believe. And my grandmother never stopped believing, and she still doesn't stop believing. She still comes on these things. She still comes out with me, and I still talk with her. But you know what? Autumn, she's giving me $5 a day. How much you think she asked from me now? With inflation, it's like $100. So she's like, you got $100? I'm like, hey, like, maybe you get $5, right? But with inflation today, she's retired. She's retired now. And you know, on a retired income, you may not get that much money retired income. You have a set limit. Do you expect her to go out and work like she did for 38 years? She's been retired for 20 years. So guess what? The people that she laid her life down for have come back on the other end to say, thank you. What do you need now? That's my role today. Huh?
I just wanted to say that thank you for you guys coming, and I appreciate it very much because my mother passed away when I was in 8th grade here. And then recently in September, my brother did something horrible to himself, and he came out of the military. He came home, and it was only like 2 days, and I found out from my grandmother that he shot himself because he had terrible flashbacks, and I don't know what he would have. I know a lot about. I don't really know a lot about military and what they go through, but they go through now a lot. They scream in your face, literally. They will do that, and which I can never be a part of someone screaming in my face because I would want to go back at them. But my brother was, to me, he was a very, very brave person. And every time I think about it, it just makes me want to cry. But my mother and my brother were actually very good Christian people. And I know that when I think about it, don't cry. Don't cry. Because I know when I pass away that they're going to be up there with me when I pass.
Well, Autumn, that was the most courageous thing that I have seen. And I just want to tell you something. It is not your fault, okay? It's not your fault. Can I give you a hug? Oh, my God. And you're not alone. You're not alone. And you know what, Autumn, the thing is that I came here today, and it was tough for me because talking about my mom doesn't get necessarily easier. It's how I shift my attention because I'm able to cope now. I'm not the 10-year-old walking out that door with nowhere to go, trying to save everybody else, trying to figure it out, right? I'm this 43-year-old guy who has learned to be able to cope on earth and changed my tragedy into something that people could utilize. And when I drove up here today, I always said to myself, if one person could get what I'm talking about, and not that it's not anybody else, but you told me explicitly, and I know we're on the same page. Please give Autumn a round of applause. So, wow. Thank you very much. None of you all are alone. Don't ever believe that. Don't ever believe it. Trauma will have you isolated. Trauma will have you withdrawn. Trauma can dehumanize you. When you're a human being, trauma can dehumanize you. And you know what? Trust in finding somebody to support you is bringing humanity back into the space where trauma disrupts it. So you all find somebody, one person. outside of yourself that you can trust and put energy into, and to have a healthy kind of a relationship. So we can't talk about everything here today, but I just want to say thank you to Antietam High School, and thank you very much for your time. I appreciate your time, hopefully as much as you appreciate mine. And it's just really been a pleasure and an honor to even be standing here today. Whenever somebody like Autumn, you said that to me, I'm going to reflect on it tonight as I go to sleep, and I'm going to be working harder than I ever could have worked to be able to do the things that I do. You encourage me. You inspire me.
Thank you very much, William. Thank you. Let's give him another round of applause. Thank you. All right. William will be, Don, you killed me here. All right, William will be back.